This is a walkthrough of exam number 1. The first question was asking you to use your logic to try to figure out what the value of these 4 variables A, B, C, and D are. On past exams, as you may have seen, I asked students to describe the expression values for some very simple Python expressions. However, I couldn't do that on an online exam because you could just type it into a Python window and get the same answer. So I thought I'd try something a little different. Basically, you need to try to figure out, based on these information, what the values of A, B, C, and D are. As you look at this, it first looks like you can't possibly figure this out. But once you look through all 7 of these pieces of data, then you should find something that you can solve right away. Let's just go through them quickly. It's a false statement that A of 1 is not equal to D. Well, that tells me that A of 1, which means the first element in the array A, is equal to D, but I don't yet know what D is. I know that the bth element of A is 10, but again, I don't know what B is, and all I know is that A is some list. Once again, B plus C, whatever those variables would be, their sum is equal to the first 0th element of A. Finally, the fourth one, I've got something. B raised to the dth power is 32. Since this is an integer, I can think about B and D and say, well, it could be 32 raised to the first power, I guess, but if B were 32, then I'd be looking for the 32nd element of some list A, and that's very unlikely that would be the case. And more than that, if you look at the next one, the length of A over 4.0 is 1.0. So because this is in floating point arithmetic, this tells me that the length of A, which is going to be how many elements are in A, must be an integer, and that must be equal to the value 4. So I've learned one thing first. A has 4 values. Because A has 4 values, it can't possibly have 32, and therefore B can't be 32. So then B must be 2 raised to the 5th power. So 2 is B, and D is 5. So now I've taken care of those 2. With that in mind, let's go back. A of the first element, A1, is not equal to D. That's false, which means that A of 1 is equal to D. Now remember, A of 1 is the second element in A, so I have to be careful. B is 2. A, B is 2, which means that the second element index is 10. I get that from B. Here, I still don't know what C is, so let's move on. Here, finally, something I can look at. D divided by B, well, this is 5 divided by 2, but since they're both integers, 5 divided by 2 is 2. Minus C is equal to 0. That tells me that C is equal to 2. With that information, I can now see that the last one here, third index position of A minus C is 0, which means that the third index position of A is C. Therefore, the third index position is 2. Finally, how do we get the 0th one? Well, it's B plus C. That equals 4. So that took a little bit of logic, but with that in mind, we would solve the problem. Let's move on. For this one, I'm asking you to take an incoming list and return a new list containing every other element in the original list. There are several ways of solving this problem, and naturally I want you to solve it just from scratch. There are some more advanced Python functions that you can work with, but let's think about this. I want to write a function skip, so let's put that in, def skip. It takes in a list A, and that already is 2, 4, 5, 6 points out of 24. So even if you had just started doing the most rudimentary aspects of this problem, you'd be able to get some partial credit. What does skip do? It takes a list of values, in this case A, and returns a new list. Okay, so I'm going to have a new list, and when this is done, I'm going to return that new list. So this is added 2, 3, 4, 5, another 5 points. I'm already at 11, almost halfway done. I need to skip every other element in the list. Now, there are some ways of doing this. The way that I had thought of doing this was by introducing a Boolean variable that you would say something like keep is equal to true, and then I do something for every element in the list. For every element E in A, if it turns out that I'm asked to keep it, then I'm going to append it to the end of my list. And then every time through the list, I just have to make sure to alternate. So this is one way to do it. Another way to do this is to use some integer arithmetic, which you've seen on some of the other ones. I'll just do it here just so you can see what it would look like. Here's the alternative one. Everything else starts out being the same. But instead of getting every element, I'm going to go through variables, and it's going to be the range of the length of A. This is a common idiom in Python. Whenever you want to get all the index values for a list, you say range of len of that list. Now, if it turns out that I is an even number, I want to keep it, that element. So if I %2, percent being the modulo function that you've seen me use in some of the lectures, if that is ever 0, that means it's an even number, then I want to keep it. So I have to make sure to append, I don't append I, that's just the index location. I append A of I. And then when I'm done, I just return vowels. So these are two ways of solving that very same problem. Let's move on. I want to define a new function called sum. What does this new function do? Well, it takes two lists of the exact same size and returns a new list where I have the sum of the respective elements. Again, let's just get started. I'm going to have two lists, A and B, and when I'm done, I'm going to return a new list. So let's just imagine I'm going to set it up assuming that I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm going to have some empty lists, and then I'm going to return it full of some information. Now here the trick is, I can't just iterate over all the elements in A or all the elements in B. I kind of have to do both at the same time. Well, if you think again, these lists have the exact same size, so if I just do the index positions for I in range of len of A, doesn't matter which one I choose, and I want to return the sum of each corresponding element, then I can append to my vowels list A of I plus B of I. This will guarantee that I've taken the corresponding elements in the 8th array and the bth array, found the right index location, and returned them. So this would work for that particular problem. Finally, no, not finally yet, part 4. Here's a debugging exercise. You've seen them on my past study guides, and I did mention I was going to include one as well. I just want to write a function that returns a new list whose elements are the absolute value of the parameter list. Well, there's more than 4 defects here, and I just wanted you to come up with several of them. I'll just go down the list. First, this define. Well, it should be DEF, because that's how you define a function in Python. So here's the first one, DEF. After that, let's make a note of that over here. Define should be DEF. Okay. After that, this looks like I'm going for every element in the list, but I'm not. This is range. Now the range function actually expects an integer as a parameter, and here I'm passing in the list itself. So it's really something I'm doing mixed up. I really just want to say for E in values, like this. So this is the second defect. I want to take range of len, range of values, and just turn into values. If E, that value E, is in fact, well, in this case it's looking for a positive number, but I want it to take negative values and turn them into positive values. So this should really be less than. There's the other third defect in this one. Should be less than, not greater than. If E is less than 0, I want to turn it into a positive number. Now the equals operator is a conditional. It tells you whether a value is the same as something else. I don't want that. I want the equals operator, which is the assignment. So here, equals should be equals. Finally, again more, if I want to add an element to a list, I don't use add. That's what we've seen for string concatenation or for numeric values. I want to say that I want to take my new list and append E to that. So this little note over here. Should be append not plus. However, I'm actually missing the definition of new lists. That's another defect, which is that new lists must be defined Otherwise, it's a defect first. And the last one is, notice that this return list is at the wrong level of indentation. This must be indented so it's part of the function. And this is just an indentation error. So there's 6 defects there, actually 7, and I just wanted 4. Last question has some code here, and the idea is you're trying to figure out what it's supposed to output. And we can figure this out just by looking at the code and inspecting it. So if I was typed in 2413 as the input, let's look at the code. X is now going to be a list of 4 elements. I'm going to do some kind of for loop, and at the end of it I'm going to print out count. So it looks like I'm going to print out a single integer value. Count starts off being 0, and every time through the for loop it has an opportunity to be incremented one at a time, but only if something is not the case. So here val is going to be each subsequent element in X. In this case starting out with 2, 4, then 1, then 3. X of 0, the 0th element in X, is the first element, which is going to be the value 2. So I'm going to start, and if 2, in this case, the val, is greater than or equal to X of 0, which they're actually the same, therefore 2 is greater than or equal to 2, I want to take that 0th element and I want to increment it by val. So there's a little bit of mind games here going on here. I know that val is 2, I know X of 0 is 2, so after I'm done with this one, my X is actually going to be 4, 4, 1, 3. Make a little note of that. And count doesn't change because here this branch executed, not the else branch. The second time through, val is 4. Well, is 4 greater than or equal to X of 0? 4 is indeed greater than or equal to 4. So I take X of 0 and I increment it by val, which in this case is 4. So now I'm at 8. I still haven't changed count. Count is still 0. The third time through the loop, val is 1. Well, 1 is not greater than or equal to 8, so count is incremented. So now count is 1. The fourth and final time through the loop, val is 3. 3 is not greater than or equal to 8, so count is incremented again. So now count is 2. So the correct answer is going to be 2, is what gets printed out. And I just look back at what I have. My value for X is going to be 8413. Now the last thing says, well, can you construct a sample list of 4 elements for which it prints out 0 as output? Now for this to happen, now that we've understood this program a little bit more, if I want 0 to be output, then I can never do this else branch, which means that the value that I get must always be greater than or equal to the original value. But the original value is incremented each time through, so it's not as simple as just saying 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to make sure that each subsequent value in the list is greater than the sum of all the previous values before. So if I start with the one that came to mind for me was 1, 2, 4, 8. Because 1, first time through, 1 is added to itself to get 2, and the next time through I'm on 2, which will be added through to get 4, and then 4, 8, and so on. So this will be the answer that gives you, it's one answer. There's many other answers you can come up with. All that I care about in this one is that each value is greater than the sum of all prior values. Another one could be, for example, 10, 20, 40, well, 50, and then 80, make that 120. It doesn't really matter what I come up with, as long as each one is greater than the sum. So that's the solution to this exam. It tried to assess a number of individual skills that you have, as well as give you the opportunity to try to put them all together to solve specific problems. Please go back and review this solution in light of the grade that you received, to try to understand what skills you were missing, what mistakes you made. Maybe they were obvious mistakes made under time pressure. Maybe they were fundamental mistakes that you still need to work on. But I encourage you to do so. This completes the review of Exam 1.